The world's preeminent business growth expert, Jay Abraham.
Jay is not you.
Jay showing you how to find more money. He's making it rain.
This is a man that you cannot afford to be without.
This is the Ultimate Entrepreneur with Jay Abraham.
Welcome to the Ultimate Entrepreneur. I'm Brian Oney with the Abraham Group. In this episode, Scott Sylvan Bell interviews Jay Abraham about resilience. I'll let Scott introduce Jay.
Every single day, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and business owners are faced with struggles, problems, and pains. It can be employee issues, advertising challenges, limitations, labor disputes, implementation rejection, lack of respect for strategies that have been designed, poor planning, and the list can go on and on. It could just be not knowing where to go, what to do, or who to ask. If this is you and you're struggling, there is a message of hope. You are not alone. In all these issues you face, who can you turn to in a way that you can get the answers that you need, and most of all, the ones that are the truth? One of the hidden conversations that comes up in just about all of these concepts is the idea of resiliency. It's not just what's the plan. It comes down to the plan. Is it going to work? Can I do this work? Who else has been through this? And most of all, who really has the answers to what I'm facing? When people ask these questions, there's a sense of desire to ask around resiliency, but so many people are scared to say, I don't know what to do. I don't know who to ask. I don't know which direction to turn. Today's guest is a man who sat on the front lines of business for over 40 years and has shared the strategies needed to find success in literally thousands of industries. The view he's had gives insights and ideas that very few people can have. I would like to introduce you to Mr. Jay Abraham. He's been featured in magazines like Success Magazine, Inc. Magazine, Business Daily, US Today, the New York Times, Los Angeles Times, and that's just to name a few. Jay's been listed as one of the top 5 executive coaches in the United States. Forbes magazine called Jay the real thing. The topics Jay's developed include exponential business growth, risk reduction, the power Parthenon, preeminence, relational capital, and the list could keep going on and on. One of the things that I admire most about Jay is the answer you think you'll get is typically not the one that he's going to give. These surprises lead to insights and knowledge that you can take action on and take to the bank. Please welcome Jay Abraham. Jay, what happened when you were a kid that gave you an example of how to keep going when everybody else wanted to quit?
Well, I think a couple of things. Probably, if I did some introspective thinking, Scott, I came from a very loving but very humble background, and we had very little. And I wanted certain things that my parents weren't able to provide. And I was always, I think, entrepreneurial because I always did fun things. I'd rebuild bikes and sell them, collect Coke bottles and sell them, get any kind of summer job I could. I think at one time I had 2 paper routes. So I think that I had an inherent, and I don't know that this isn't true of a lot of entrepreneurs, I had an inherent desire or belief that I could accomplish anything, and that I don't think defeat in my mind was a sense of permanency. I think it was just, okay, that didn't work that way. So let's either try it a different way or try a different something. But it wasn't, I never saw it as being, my self-esteem wasn't, now that doesn't mean I didn't have some really interesting and complex setbacks. I did, but it never was defeating. I'm sorry, the phone will ring a little bit for a few minutes. And I think that I always had a vision of wanting to make things happen, and probably just an inherent understanding that things don't happen straight up. If it's audio, I'm making the motion straight up. And so consequently, I was able to, take a lot of defeat, not in stride, but I realized whether it's destiny or plight or job was to just bounce back. I remember there was an incident in my early life where I was married at a very young age. And I, number one, lost my first job the day we moved into our first apartment. And I was taking buses, and I take 4 buses, and took the last ones because I was not very proud of myself. And then 2 weeks later, somebody stole our baby's car seat, and I didn't have enough money to replace it right away. I was that modest, as far as poor, I guess you would say, in my finances. And I remember two different things happened. For a few minutes, I actually cried. I was that heartbroken. And then I realized nobody cares. And that has 2 sides to it, Scott. Nobody cares if you're down for the count, you give up, you stay on the mat, and you're out never to reappear again. And nobody cares if you bounce back with a vengeance and you spring back and hurtle to statures and achievements and accomplishments way beyond those of mortal men or women. So if they don't care either way, why even worry about what seems like defeat, which in the business arena, in health, it might be different, but in the business arena, it's really, it has to do more with self-esteem and your own sense of either accomplishment or not, but it has nothing to do with reality. You can always try something new. You can always reapproach something. You can always bounce back. And I don't know if that makes sense or it's protracted ADD response, but yeah,
I think that makes total sense to look at it as a direction of there's really 2 paths that you can take at this point. You can fall down or you can get back up and keep going.
Yeah. And I always, it doesn't mean I'm resiliency personified. I've had more than a few reversals or setbacks that caught me, off guard. And I was aghast at myself and what happened. But, today, we have deals that don't close. We have people that don't pay. We have things that people do to me that I'm shocked by, and probably things I unintentionally do to others. And I take most of it in stride. I try to grow from the negatives, and I try to contribute more positives. And it's probably, I don't get, I don't get defeated very often, even if something doesn't work. And I don't get horrified, if there's setbacks. I try to always believe that we're moving forward all the time. Sometimes our forward movement has to be a little serpentine or zigzag. But if you're committed to an onward, upward, forward motion all the time, then a reversal, again, a health one can be more traumatic than a business one. And a business one, isn't always pleasant because you can owe money, you can lose the ability to do things, material things, staff, offices. It can be short-term. I don't call it humiliating, but it can be deflating. But if you go, okay, this is only an interim thing, it's temporary. It's a temporary move. I'm going to lateral into the next growth stage. Then it's a comforting way to try to look at it. And then but you also, I think, Scott, have to be able to utilize some degree of what I'll call learned competence. By that, I mean, if whatever happened to you is in some way or in every way attributable to your own conduct, you have to learn from that what to stop doing or what to do differently or what new path to take, or you'll keep repeating. It's almost the equivalent of reincarnation, but you'll do it on this earth. So I think you have to learn from what happened, and you have to integrate that into what you do next. But since we're all students, and we should be all of our life, you can actually enjoy the process to the extent that the pain can be subdued. There's always going to be pain in anything that doesn't go the way you want, unless, of course, it outperforms your expectations. Then there's a shocking joy. But I just think I have an attitude that says, hey, we're on this earth to constantly learn. And when you learn, it's not always pleasurable. And again, I think it's a little more challenging, a lot more, if it's health-based. But in business or career, setbacks, think about it. Some of the greatest rebounders wouldn't have done it if they didn't have a setback. And if you look at many of the best companies, they had to pivot 2 or 3 times because their initial business or their model or the IBM had to change. A bunch of people had to change. My brain isn't recalling other specifics, but I just think it's part of the what would I call it? Part of the dynamic of being alive. Relationships with your counterpart don't always go right, but your goal in life is to grow. Your goal in life is to be better. Your goal in life is, not even, Winston Churchill said, never, ever, 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 ever give up. But I don't think that's a singularly correct. I think it's never, ever, ever give up, but always learn from whatever happened. And you have to have, someone taught me something years ago, and it was about a salary job. He said, most people don't understand we're all on commission. Doesn't matter if you get a salary. The commission is a correlation. It's like a draw against, if you don't perform at a minimum amount, your draw is going to be taken away, isn't it?
Absolutely.
If everything is performance oriented and performance is more tied to us than outside, then we ought to celebrate it. So, I don't know if that helps, but I'm just giving you random thoughts.
What I find interesting in your answer is, instead of fighting and resisting the change, you're saying that you're using the Aikido principle and pulling it along with you.
Yeah. What's my option? If my option is, because I used to get for a period, upset, angry, totally inflexible, and that doesn't do anything. Nobody cares. Nobody really cares. People will say, "Oh, Scott, poor thing. You had a reversal, or the business didn't work, or somebody didn't pay you, the $200,000 they owed you, or that deal that was supposed to close didn't, or your keynote was a bomb, or whatever." And I've had all of those. But so what? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter for 2 reasons. Somebody said to me years ago, when you look back 5 or 10 years from whatever moment of adversity you're struggling with, it'll be as inconsequential as a pimple on the pickle of time. And he said, you just got to basically move on. If you don't move on, then you're stuck reliving negativity, aren't you?
That I would agree, and that makes total sense.
Yeah, we have I'm sorry, please.
This philosophy that you're living by, is it something that you've learned over time? Is it something that you've grown with over time? Is it something taught you, or was it just inherent?
It's probably an aggregation of insights that I have gotten from lots of different experiences. But I think it's just that I got started at 18. I had in the adult world, I had no skill. I was married, had 2 children at 20, was not treated as if I was a sophisticated piece of human capital. In the beginning, I was very shocked, but as I evolved and matured, I realized that I probably deserved nothing more than that, and that I got opportunities. But we have the ability, if you realize it, to make the most or the least out of all aspects of our life. There's no one that keeps you in a job. There's no one that keeps you in that job in a company. There's no one that says, it's when all these people go, "Oh, I wish I had a business. I wish I was making more. I wish I could have a big house," or whatever. They don't. If they wanted it badly enough, they would figure out what to do to acquire it. Wouldn't you think?
Absolutely.
And they would not watch Netflix, and they would not, do some of the other things, and they would invest in knowledge that they would apply. Many people spend money on what I would call insurance policies they don't really do anything with. They'll buy a course, or they'll buy books that they may or may not really, embrace, read, watch, but they don't do much of anything with it. And if the first thing they do doesn't work, they close their tent and move on to the next thing that won't work because they aren't resilient enough to stay in the game long enough to win.
When you take a look at resiliency, it seems like crisis will trigger it. What are some of the best or surprising traits that you've seen from resilient business leaders in times of struggle?
Presence of mind. And this is true. Somebody made a request of me, and I was fascinated. He said, I think, and I want you to confirm it, Jay, that ADD people are better under stress than not. And I said, I think you're right. Business stress doesn't faze me. Trying to figure out where I left my papers phases me. Forgetting things phases me. But the most complex business issues don't faze me. I mean, setbacks don't faze me in the business arena. But I think that, resiliency is, first of all, presence of mind to grasp what's going on. I'm probably blessed a little bit because I have a context of a lot of reference frames to source, evaluate, and access. So in other words, if you have a setback in a given endeavor, encounter, activity, and it's the first time you've ever experienced that, you're probably going to be a lot more emotional, reactive, stressed, and maybe not in full control of your logic genes. Whereas I've probably had so damn many that I experienced, but so many more geometrically multiplied that I've had to go through for clients that it's not what do you do? It's, okay, what do we do when this happened in this scenario? What do we do when the same thing happened in this scenario? What do we do when the same thing happened? And then you do that in nanoseconds, and you process, you distill, you either create a hybrid or you sort and source the best application. But, having a lot of experiences helps people master that level of resiliency. I think the more experiences you have, the more resiliency you probably have, but I don't know that.
I think that brings us right into the next question is, when it comes down to it, I get to watch you interact frequently with business owners and entrepreneurs, and you give an answer where they think that you're going to zig and you zag, and it's not the answer they expected. It wasn't the solution that they expected. So how often do you believe that their own resilience gets in the way from them actually to take an action on an idea or a strategy that you gave them?
Yeah, well, you nailed it earlier, and here's what typically happens. People get a preconceived notion of what they think they want to hear. And if what somebody shares is different, and particularly with me, I'm ADD, but in terms of my work with clients, I'm super logical and a very, very good, I think, critical and consequential thinker. But it's often not what they're expecting. And when you get what you're not expecting, there is an inclination to discount it very significantly. I would say that probably with all candor, half of the greatest advice, strategies, concepts, ideas that I've offered were never acted upon because it was outside what they wanted or expected. And it's sad. I can't get out of my mind. We have a semi-new client, and the guy's really prosperous, and he's invested in a certain kind of investment category, but he wants to be an inspirational, motivational speaker. And he paid me for helping him in the first session we had. It was evident to me, the guy, he didn't have clarity of his message. He didn't have clarity of his ideology. He didn't have clarity of his methodology. He just had this desire and a bunch of buzzwords. And my initial consult with him was tough love brutal, because I said, look, we got to figure out, what do you stand for? Why is it different? What's it based on? How does it function? What are the key components? How are we going to express, demonstrate, and what kind of names are we going to give to these? And he had no answers. And he disappeared. He paid me and never called back because he was angry. He wanted me to celebrate how great he had a name that was an abstract name, a non-methodology that wasn't even refined, but it was very compelling. And I challenged him with a reality check that he didn't like. And that has happened more than I'd like to remember. And I was really disappointed for him, not for me, because I thought I gave him the best reasoned advice isn't always the advice people want to hear. They want to hear so often what they want to hear, or they even want confirmation. I'll never forget, there were two people that I knew who were copywriters, and they were very good, but they weren't perfect. And whenever they would send their copy to me, they would not really send it because they wanted it critiqued. They wanted it acknowledged. They wanted it admired. They wanted it confirmed. And when I send my copy, I frankly don't care. I love if you tear the crap out of it. I'm too close to it. I write and sometimes it's out of order, or I start a concept and finish it later, and I can't see it because I'm too subjective. But subjectivity and predisposed beliefs can be it's toxic to breakthroughs and growth. I mean, most of my stuff is very simplistic when you look at it, but people think sometimes I'm going to rock their world with this earth-shattering, high-tech, super colossal, unimaginably, it's going to be sort of like the earth's going to move, which the earth will move financially, but it's going to be a very simplistic more often than not. It's going to be, hey, you don't see that this can connect to this. And if you do that, it can produce that. And that's probably going to be a lot more successful than some wildly, abstract, protracted, but people don't see those connections with the clarity that perhaps I do. That's been a challenge in my career, is that when I've gotten people to do these seemingly simplistic things, more often than not, it works. When I have not, more often than not, they feel underserved. And it's been a fascinating dilemma, because even if you pre-orient them that what they're going to probably hear is at first going to seem obvious and simple, but it's only obvious and simple because I have developed the ability to really access it.
What I heard you say is that the ego gets in the way and stops people from their growth, and that the clarity is the roadmap to get them to the next point. That when you go through your own struggles, it sounds like you're very clear on what you want, you personally.
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm enjoying your interpretation because you're simplifying it and clarifying it. I love being asked questions I haven't really thought about or addressed before, but when that happens, my answers are going to be stream of consciousness and probably a bit maybe abstract and protracted. So distilling them and translating them for the audience is a great service. So thank you in their behalf and mine. What else can I answer for you?
So part of business and entrepreneurship is having critics and people who dislike your offer, your product, your service. This has happened to you. What do you tell yourself when that happens?
I learned many years ago a concept, and I'm going to share that with you, and then I'm going to buffer it with a corollary. So I had a client who was very successful, but he was liked and disliked. He wasn't hated. And he had a motto he adhered to. I'd rather be loved or hated than merely tolerated. And the concept there is people that just tolerate you, there's no loyalty. There's no sustainability. The moment that they get a better offer, they're out there, a new drug, whatever. You have to do something. I mean, today's a little worse because of people online, but you have to do something reasonably heinous for people to outright hate you. And, it's a little different in our political system maybe, but, most part, if you get people who really are your champions, your fans, your advocates, that's what you want. And if you try to be all things to all people, what you really are is you're diluted, your milkweed toast. You can't be all things to all people. I mean, you can if you're a utility or something like that, but most of them, aren't that loved and respected. They're not always reliable. You want people to care so deeply about you because they see in your work, they see in your service contribution to whatever they're trying to either get closer or further from, whichever the goal is, pain and pleasure. And I think that's just, I've always, at first I wanted everybody to get me. And I realized it was a pipe dream. It's a fallacy. If everybody likes you, then you're not pushing the envelope. It's just like in a business. If you have no attrition, if nobody quits and you don't fire anybody, you're not challenging people enough. You can't.
That's a very elegant perspective. I like that.
No, but it's true, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah. So, I think the same thing with polarizing. If some people don't think you're not that great, but a lot of people think you are great, then you probably have accomplished more than people think, because there are products that can be good for everyone, but it's a rarity. You want to be able to resonate with advocates and champions who really and truly, you want to make them better off. They're going to make you better off because they're going to be your loyal band of merry men and women who are going to sing your praises, who are going to stick with you, who are going to be there. And today, more than ever before, we have to try to play a game, a long game, not a short one, because it's too difficult to acquire a client, a buyer, patient. It's too expensive. And once you get them, you want to be able to really resonate and bond in a way that relationship and all that will flow from it, repurchases, referrals, family and friends coming, all that stuff will continue long enough. And I think you've got to polarize. You got to either be loved or hated.
So you actively look for a way to either be loved or hated in your transactions?
I don't try to be hated, but I also have very strong perspectives. I have a bit of maybe an arrogant way of promoting myself. I have a tendency to challenge status quo, and I have the inability to be masterful in technology, which prejudices some people because they think that's a terrible, terrible weakness, and it may be. But yeah, I think I'm very candid about who I am and who I'm not, and what I am and what I'm not, and what I do and what I don't, and what value I can add and what I can't. And that, instead of being celebrated by everyone, sometimes is denigrated. But that's sort of who I am.
That's what I find interesting about your body of work.
What?
That you're not afraid to be who you are, that you say things, you take action, and that you're willing to step outside of the coloring crown area that everybody else tends to work within. I
don't know that that's courage or indulgence, but it is who I am. And it served me more often better. I've had certain times when that has not necessarily worked to my optimal advantage, but I think Shakespeare said it, Scott, to thine own self be true. I can't remember if it was Hamlet or Polonius. I don't read Shakespeare very much. But if you're not true to yourself, then the opposite, then you're false to yourself. And if you don't like yourself, why would you imagine anybody else would? What part of imposter syndrome plays into resiliency and the ability to keep going? How can you step up bigger with integrity? Well, there's that adage of fake it till you make it. But I think imposter syndrome, the way I would interpret it, is I would probably change that, because I don't like the implications. I would probably say persona. Persona, I wouldn't even call it syndrome. I'd say persona roles. So, if you don't see yourself any higher, better, different than you are today, then you're guilty of the grow or die syndrome, you're really going to regress. So you might as well see yourself growing. If you see yourself growing, first thing is envision what that's supposed to look like. That goes into, some metaphysical stuff, or the Think and Grow Rich stuff, or the secret type stuff, or things like that. But I think there's nothing wrong with having certainty and confidence as long as you don't depict yourself above your capabilities. If I say, hey, like I was on the phone today doing an exploratory call with a company that's very sophisticated, and I don't know that I'll be able to serve them well. And I told them that, but I said, but let me tell you what I can do. And I have enough confidence to say, I think I could, but maybe I can't. But if I don't give myself permission to want to swim in those kind of waters, I never will. If I say I'm only going to wade in the baby pool because I don't want to get water above my knee, then I've self relegated my being to a very static sort of an existence, don't you think?
Yeah, and what I heard in there was that you have the ability to be forward-thinking and vulnerable at the same time.
Yeah, very good interpretation. I think that's brilliant. I get rejected more than you'll ever know, but I don't see it as it's not, it has nothing to do with my self-esteem. I like most of myself. I don't like it all, but I like most of it.
I think what I picked up from you from the beginning to this point is that you separate your identity, that your business success and failures isn't everything about you. Would I be correct to say that?
Yeah. I mean, people were shocked. I was very, very significant and successful in the seminar business for a pretty nice period of time. And one day I was on stage thinking, I don't want to be intellectual entertainment. I don't want to just iterate all and utter all the same thing over and over again for a bunch of people that are going to be mesmerized for 3 or 5 days and then go right back to status quo and do very little with it. And I quit. And I know people whose whole existence is founded and grounded in their ability to be on a stage and have people genuflex and be in awe. And if I don't get on a stage ever again, it won't bother me.
So that's an interesting perspective that, so many people are wrapped up in that identity that they have to be to somebody. And it sounds like at this point in the stage where you're at, that's not what excites you anymore.
I don't think so. I mean, it's fun, when I do, I haven't obviously because of COVID, but when I go on a stage with 10,000 people, it's sort of cool. But I wasn't into it to where if I didn't have 10,000 people, I would basically go into the fetal position and be depressed the rest of my life. It's not, again, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's fun. And if you can move them, it's fun. But normally when you're on the stage with that many people, you're one of a bunch of people and it's a fragmented thing. And it's just little, let's say, shards of knowledge transfer. So, I mean, there's self-serving benefit, but there's actually less benefit to the recipient because it's really not the same dynamic.
Interesting. Somebody listening right now or somebody watching right now is in panic mode and they have uncertainty in their life. And it may be that their business is falling apart. They've lost a partner, government regulations, employees are coming and going. What word of advice or words of advice would you give them about keep going?
Well, I'd say the following. The world isn't going to end, and adversity always produces opportunity. At the very beginning of COVID, we did sessions where I identified 5 or so windows of opportunity that would have never been made possible. And they were all benevolent opportunity, not capitalizing viciously or avariciously on somebody else's despair, but actually doing things that would basically compensate and help financially resuscitate people. I think if you think of everything, I don't know if it's a zero-sum game is not the thing I would say. Everything adjusts. It's not, the great thing about the world, I don't know if it's quantum physics or whatever it is, but there's expansion and contraction. And they go hand in hand, Scott. You can't have something contract if something else doesn't expand. Conversely, you can't have expansion without contraction. I think what happened in COVID is horribly sad. I think the deaths are just tragic. I think that the injury it invoked on businesses is horrific. But I mean, Tony Robbins says it probably much better, something paraphrasing. You can't always change what's happened, but you can change the way you proactively respond to it. I think that, where's the opportunity in this situation? Where's the positivity in this event? Where is the path of possibility or prosperity in this journey that I need to find? I mean, when you're in an airplane and you encounter really bad weather or turbulence, they have to go up around it, below it. They very rarely just stay going through it if they have an alternative. But we don't really live our lives that way, even though it's a great metaphor.
Interesting. Your answers require me to think, and there's so many questions that I want to ask, but I also want to respect your time.
Yeah, no. Well, I hope this is helping achieve your objective.
Absolutely. I think that from watching and listening to entrepreneurs not ask the question about resiliency, and I find that a lot of times people are scared to say, if I raise my hand and ask the question, I'm going to look silly or I'm going to look dumb. And the reality is, from me being in front of rooms and teaching, I've always found that if one person has a question, multiple people have the same question.
Great.
One last question for you, Jay.
Yes, sir.
When you think about your lifetime of business, what is your favorite I got knocked down and I got back up again story? Like, if you could only pick one.
Wow. Only one. Let's think of what that would be. Oh, I guess it's funny. It's not a knockdown story, but we had a book. It wasn't really a book. It was almost a huge compendium called Money Making Secrets of a Marketing Genius. And through a very, I think, innovative marketing and positioning approach, we were able to sell, I think, 72,000 copies for $377 a copy in a mere 15 or 18 months. And it was pretty remarkable. And I'd never forget that in the middle of that, somebody sent that book to a prominent New York publishing house. Let's call it Random House. It may not have been. And they rejected it. It won't sell. And we'd already sold in dollars, 72 times 400, almost $30 million of books direct. And I bought my beach house all cash. It generated on the back end 12 or 15,000 5-figure seminar attendees, but it won't sell. The market, it's not good enough to sell. And I just always remember that was funny. But probably another one was, let's see, I guess when I went through a very painful divorce, and I also went through a very painful business partnership dissolution, and it really cost me many millions of dollars. Both of those occurrences were pretty significant setbacks, if you will. And I think that what was great was when I got out of them, I came into one and I had millions of dollars in the bank and no debt. And I came out of it with millions in debt and no money in the bank. And I remember for a few minutes I was perplexed and I thought, okay, what can we do bigger and better? And I was able to utilize relationships to do $250 million of seminars. I was able to use my forward ingenuity to figure out how to be an advocate to a lot more people and impact a lot more people. I was able to take what I saw as value all over the world and find people, because I believe there must be people that had the same profile as the people we were attracting in the United States. And I was able to find people in the UK, and I was able to do it with partners. I was able to find people Singapore, Malaysia to do it with. I was able to find people in Japan to do it with. I was able to find people in China to do it with. I was able to find people, in other countries. And I think it's that defeat is not permanent.
Earlier, you had talked about making simple statements and then people not wanting to listen to them because they're so simplified. That saying of defeat is not permanent, just it resonates. And I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And I enjoy your questions. So let's do some more at another time, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
This has been a presentation of Abraham Media, the world's preeminent business growth expert, Jay Abraham.
He's a very, very special man. He's brilliant.
Jay Abraham has an idea a minute mind. He is a marketing guru that never stops. He's a cash flow, an advertising, and a sales generating machine.
If there was a Hall of Fame or a Super Bowl of business or marketing, this man would be there.
In fact, Jay was the person who helped the founder of Federal Express triple his business with one great idea.
The $9 billion man, Jay Abraham. Join the Abraham Mastermind Alliance today at abraham.com.